First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. I'm Connie Corey. I am with Aldridge and Southern Realtors in Greenville. And I would like to thank David Dye, who is a home inspector in the Durham area, and Brad Carter, who is also a realtor in Greenville. And I would like to note that all the feedback and conversations today are only our personal views and are not on behalf of the North Carolina Home Inspectors Licensure Board. So I'm going to start, because we only have a few minutes, with Brad. And Brad, can you share one of the most common questions that realtors tend to have for home inspectors?
Sure. I think one of the most common questions that realtors would have for home inspectors are a lot of times after a home inspection is completed and the agent has met with their client and prepared a due diligence request and agreement, and if those repairs are agreed upon by the seller, once they're done, a few weeks after the person moves in, sometimes we all know we get calls about things that are not functioning properly, and they call me or any realtor to ask, what do I need to do? The inspector missed such and such. And I try to be forthright on the front end and say, look, these home inspectors are human beings. They're going to miss various things. Some things are checked representatively. It is not an exhaustive process, and they are really looking for major deficiencies. However, if it's something that you feel that should not have been missed, you're more than welcome to call the inspector. And so that's one thing I get after the deal is done. They seem to always call back and tell me that certain systems or certain items are not working as they should be.
So do you think sometimes it comes because the home inspector doesn't have accessibility to inspect, like a panel box, or you can't get to a water heater because of boxes and things like that? So I'm going to ask David if he would comment on that, because we do see that a lot on some of our inspections.
Gotcha. Yeah, there are oftentimes where things are not accessible, and primarily the areas are the attic. That's always storage furniture. People forget that their large dresser and that sort of thing are just below that pull down staircase, which can block your access. Crawl space, biggest problems we see there are locks. People have locked that up, and electric panels, also locks more than anything else. And in terms of electric panels, I encourage everyone to remind the client that they often have more than one electric panel. There can be one outside with the meter. It can be more than two electric panels, to try to find all of them and make sure there's access to it. The HVAC systems and water heaters, again, are often blocked by storage. The classic problem is that the garage is often used as the declutter way station, and putting everything in the garage, they're blocking sometimes a water heater, electric panels, and things like that. If we get ahead of this, as always, if you get ahead of the situation, remind people that these are items of special importance to the home inspection, and to clear that path, keep that path to those items, as well as a work area in front of them. And with the electric panels, we are removing the panel cover itself, and therefore exposed to energized circuits, and that's a safety concern. So we can't stand on our head and to get access to something that's dangerous like that. We have to have a good safe work area to get away from it if we need to.
Thank you. Brad, I also wanted to ask you, as a listing agent, how do you prepare your your sellers or your buyers for the home inspection, and what to have them prepared to expect from the inspection? And, do you advise them to kind of declutter if it's an opportunity that they can?
Yes, I'd say from a buyer standpoint, I'm being a little redundant here, but I think you should set realistic expectations and remind any buyers that an inspection is not totally exhaustive. You know, it's to get a snapshot of the current health of the home, the major systems. Not every single thing is going to be discovered. I mean, there's latent defects that no one can see between wall cavities and whatnot. And I just think that it's very important to just let them know, set realistic expectations. And from a seller standpoint, yes, you should always explain to them what happens during a home inspection. And some sellers are, you know, we all have those great sellers that take such pride in their home. And you kind of want to talk with them and say, look, you've done a beautiful job with this home, and I feel very confident as you do. I think if there's something majorly wrong, it'll be a surprise to both you and me and the buyer. But there will be things wrong, regardless of your extreme detailed maintenance. Most people do not crawl under their homes on a regular basis unless they don't have much going on in life. So, things will be discovered, and you just ask them to make the inspector's job as easy as possible. You know, if you have a pull down attic stairs, try to make sure prior to the inspection that the inspector has access to get up into that area, to view rafters, to view roof sheathing, to look at plumbing vents, and as David said, we all know that the garage is kind of an area that you can get away with having items stored, but it sure would be nice to not store along the exterior walls, not only for the home inspector, but the wood destroying insect inspector, so that that person can check for maybe termite tubes or, look around that perimeter of that room. So I just think it's common sense to try to make it as easy as possible on the inspector so that they can give a true report on the current health of that home.
David, would you like to add some to what would a home inspector like to see a house prepared for?
Well, what I do with in preparing for a home inspection is I always send the listing agent a checklist, and I'm happy to share that checklist with anyone if they want to reach out to me and send it to you. As Brad said, stressing the importance of enabling the inspection to go smoothly makes the whole process go smoothly. I mean, we're all there trying to handle what is oftentimes a very stressful process for folks. I mean, they are making their single largest investment, and we want them to feel comfortable that they're getting the best information they can to make a good decision.
And one of the things that I often see on inspection reports, and years back, lesson learned, there's always a reference to a qualified HVAC technician or a qualified plumber or a structural engineer. And so I think some of us have just started where we go to do an inspection, we just have a HVAC guy there to inspect the heating and cooling system. So when you go to inspect a heating and cooling system, what exactly are you looking for that would determine if somebody else needed to look at it as well?
Well, I mean, at the home inspection, we are operating the heating and the cooling side, cooling dependent on outside temperature. If it's too cold, we cannot operate the cooling system. And we're opening the furnace, but primarily it is a visual inspection. We're looking for signs of a problem, as we do throughout the home. We look at the ceiling to see a water stain. That's a sign that there may be a problem either with plumbing or roof. Same with HVAC, corrosion more than anything else, but there are many other things we're looking for. But what we are not doing is a technically exhaustive, that's the term we use. It basically means we're not using measurements such as static pressure, refrigerant levels, current load, that sort of thing, to evaluate the system. A good HVAC contractor will spend 45 minutes to an hour per system, and many homes have two. So if you look at the typical home inspection, meaning 3 to 4 hours, that gives you an idea of just what work is done by an HVAC inspector that's not done by a home inspector. On HVAC is the one system that, if I could encourage everyone to have done pre-listing, it would be that. Even if the system's only 3 years old, to have a HVAC contractor come in, maintain the system, and report their findings. Then with the home inspector comes behind them and they see a concern, it may indicate, for example, the condensation is backed up into the house and into the system. It can happen within just a few years, even on a brand new system. That again makes the process go more smoothly. Home inspector says, we see a little bit of corrosion or water stains that indicates the condensation line's backed up. The seller then says to the buyer, oh, here is my maintenance that we did on the system just before we listed it. And you can see right there that they cleaned that condensation line. Everybody's happy and the process moves on.
Okay, Brad, when you mentioned earlier about prepping your clients for the home inspection, because I've heard agents say that home inspector is going to find everything wrong with your house. And were you aware that the home inspectors have standards of practice that they go by, and it's almost like a checklist of what they check? And do you think that would be something useful for realtors to have or have knowledge of?
Yeah, I do. I am aware of that. I've never had the opportunity to view it, but you always hear as the years go by. One thing that I've heard lately, don't know if there's any truth to it, is a lot of times in these thermal or double pane windows, you'll have a failed sash or a foggy appearance. And, that really can be, especially when windows are really hard to get to up high, there has to be a judgment call made, because sometimes it can literally be a dirty window versus a failed seal, which is not giving insulation value. But I had heard that the inspector board is not making inspectors comment on those failed sashes or fog sashes. And don't know if that's true, but I think it would be very helpful for agents to know kind of what the rundown is and what their standard operating procedures are.
David, would you follow up on that, especially about the windows?
Certainly, yeah. No, the standard of practice is very specific on the structural and mechanical systems that we cover. And within recently, meaning the last few years, the standard of practice was revised to exclude whether or not there was a broken seal in a window. That we're talking about, obviously, windows with 2 panes of glass where inert gas is injected in between those 2 panes to improve its insulating ability. The reason it was removed is because detecting that is something that can depend on time of day. It can depend on the HVAC system and how it's been operating, the time of year. There's many things that can cause you to not notice a particular window has lost its seal, and that's why it was removed. However, most, if not all, home inspectors, when they see obvious signs of a broken seal, they will report it. As you say, sometimes it can be a dirty window, but more often than not, it's going to be pretty clear that there's moisture between the panes, or, believe it or not, there's actual fungal growth between the 2 panes, which is indicative of a broken seal. So it's one of those things that I think that the industry, for the most part, does as a best effort to identify those. But when you refer that to the specialist, if I find a couple of clear windows that are broken seals, as specialists, because that's what they do every day, they will come in and say, oh yeah, and here's 3 more. So don't depend on that being the exhaustive list until you've referred it to specialists.
Okay. How much more time do we have, Mackenzie? Do we have time for one more question?
You're good.
Okay. Brad has already touched on a lot of times when people go and get the inspection and they get moved into the house and they find things that were missed by the home inspector. And I'm wondering what kind of, David, of warranty does a home inspector give, if any?
Home
Or is it
inspectors don't.
individual decision?
Yeah, home inspectors don't, for the most part, provide a warranty. Sometimes they'll use a warranty service where you essentially, it's an insurance company that receives receives a premium from the home inspector, and then they're in effect warranting that. But for the most part, no. If we had 5 of the most experienced home inspectors in the area inspect a home, each of us will find something the other 4 did not. It's just the nature of it. But we're looking, of course, for the major items, the most notable items. We want to make sure, to our best of our ability, that the client understands who understands what the condition of the home is at that time, and help them make a good decision. And in terms of missing things, that Brad touched on this earlier, more than anything else, encourage them to talk to the inspector directly. Brad, you're absolutely right. You're not dishing responsibility when you say, pick up the phone and call Dave and have that conversation. I know all of my colleagues encourage clients to have that conversation. Oftentimes, something that is, quote, missed is one of those items not covered by the standard practice, maybe a cosmetic item or something like that. But developing that relationship and that rapport allows the home inspector to guide them as best they can through the situation they're in, but it also provides feedback. And that's very important for both the client and the realtor. To have these discussions and this interaction back and forth sharpens us as a tool in the process, if you will, and makes us better at the job.
Brad, would it be helpful if there was some uniformity to the inspection reports? Like we get 5 different inspections, and it may be, if you've had a pre-listing inspection, that inspection report might have been 26 pages long. And then when the buyer gets their inspection, it might be 172 pages long. But each inspector has their own format that they use. Brad, what are your thoughts on there being some type of uniform format?
Yeah, I think it would be very helpful if, like the wood destroying insect report, which is that boilerplate form that has to be used by any and all pest inspectors, it's filled out the same, well, can be filled out differently, but it you know, puts everything on a level playing field. The home either shows signs of past or present infestation with spot treatment or not, or it doesn't. I think it would be very helpful if there could be more of a boilerplate inspection form, but you know, I think there'd have to be quite a bit of work done to arrive at that, because some of these inspectors might use, say, a home gauge system for their reporting. Some might use another software program, and some are quite intimidating to a buyer. And if you know the inspector that they're going to use and you know their style, you can talk to them beforehand and say, hey, you're probably going to get about an 80-page report, but please remember, there may be 75 of those pages are just body, and there may be 5 pages of summary. What we want to concentrate on is the summary section. That might be items identified by inspector that could be deficient, or that are talking points that may need work. Mainly the crawl spaces, you know, down here where Connie and I work, crawl spaces are normally where deal killers are hiding. And there's so much interpretation between inspectors. And that's where I wish that there could be a form made that was just black and white, that could remove some of the interpretation, because everyone has different schools of thought on how to handle crawl spaces, how to dry them out, whether or not you leave your foundation vents open, closed, you put a dehumidifier, 100% vapor barrier. I mean, you know, you hire who you trust and you want to believe what they say is the gospel. But if you ask around to any friends that have bought homes, you know, everybody becomes an expert around you and tells you exactly what you need to know. And so I do think it would be nice to have a standardized format for inspectors to use. But some inspectors are more detail oriented and include more pictures, which I really like because a picture is worth 1,000 words. But the thing that really does cause a lot of conflict in my dealings, maybe just with my luck, is when you're underneath a house and they come out and they have, you know, signs of fungal growth or darkened wooden members underneath the house. Just because the wooden members are darkened doesn't necessarily mean they've lost their structural integrity, where some inspectors interpret that as a problem. And that it should be sistered or a new joist added. I think we just have such seasonal problems around here based on air conditioning months. I think you might probe wooden members in July and might get a reading of 23% wood moisture content. You could go back to the same house in February and it would read 14. So just a lot of interpretation that can really confuse buyers. And I think it's our job to try and explain that to buyers, as well as what David said. We also need to prepare them for what is included in a home inspection. If there's an outbuilding, that's not going to be inspected unless they talk to the inspector beforehand and work out a deal, probably an additional charge, and also appurtenances such as a irrigation system. A lot of times when people see irrigation in a closet, they are going to they assume that that home inspector is going to run that. And it's our responsibility to say, hey, if you would like an irrigation system inspected, that is not the duty of a general home inspector. You'll have to contract with a irrigation specialist or contractor to test those type systems. So we just need to set the expectations clear when it comes to additional items that home inspectors are not to touch, or whether it be gas logs that a pilot is not lit. We need to tell them, hey, if the pilot's not lit, that inspector's not able to touch that. And that's probably in the checklist that David has. Try to have that pilot lit so that he can verify proper operation of that gas log set. So, but interpretation is a big problem. And I do think a standardized form would be great, but I know it would be, time consuming thing to get everyone to agree on that.
David, would you comment on that as well?
Which of the three items would you like? No, seriously,
Sorry,
no, Brad, it was all very good information and very good points. First of all, the reporting itself, of course, the standard of practice does spell out what we're required to report, and it includes for each item that we are to describe the condition and where it's located and that sort of thing. We are to talk about the implication of this particular item, and I would encourage all of the realtors listening here to pay special attention to that implication point, because that tells you the degree of concern that you should have for the client. Obviously, something structural is much more concerning than something that's a door not latching, for example. But to get it down to a checklist type format would not meet the standard of practice. There are some things in terms of organization we could do that would allow things to fall in the same order, if you will. You're right that the reports are required to include the report body as well as the summary. And the summary are the items that are the concern, let's just say, is that more pertinent to the transaction itself. And you're right in that respect to point them to the summary, but please always encourage the clients to go back and review the report body, because there's a lot of information that's built in there. An example in my case would be where the main water shutoff is. Well, why do we tell them that? Because when the pipe breaks and there's water flowing everybody, no one knows what to do and they try to wrap a rag around it. No, run to that main water shutoff and turn things off. To come back to your point about fungal growth and crawl space, that is one of the bigger items. And you're right in that depending on what's observed, will dictate what you do from that point forward. I mean, fungal growth needs two things. It needs a food source, that's the wood, and it needs moisture. And you're right, the moisture content of that wood is much higher in July than it is in January. What we're trying to convey is a degree of concern. Because if we walk in or crawl in and see light fungal growth, well, that fungal growth will continue. Every time the humidity gets high enough to raise that wood content to 17% or higher, it's going to start growing again. And then when the wintertime comes, it's going to dry out and it's going to stop growing. It's going to stay where it is. Now, on one house, there may be just enough moisture in it in the summer months for it to take 120 years for it to have any real effect on the home. For another house, it may be only 2 years from that being a significant concern because that's getting a lot more moisture for whatever reason. So we're trying to convey just that. What is the level of concern? To your point, has there been any kind of deterioration of the wood structure yet? And then again, the implication of it, and then what to do next. Now, in terms of remediation, it's not just a matter of going in and cleaning the fungal growth off the wood. That's not doing anyone any good. It's a matter of identifying where the moisture is coming from. Again, whether the crawl space ventilation is appropriate or there's water flowing in from the landscaping, and remediate that first, then take care of cleaning off the fungal growth. So that's, and I'm trying to remember your third point. Those are the two things I remember from what you said.
I don't remember what it was either. Do you, Brad?
Yeah, no, just I think I made a point of concerning that we as agents need to be sure that we mention that what's included in a home inspection. We're not gonna go do outbuildings, auxiliary systems such as irrigation and
irrigation, generators are a good system to point out. There's a lot of them. And like you said, making clients aware of that ahead of time. Anything you can do to smooth out the process ahead of time and avoid any surprises for the client while they're in that short due diligence period and trying to make a big decision. That's what we're there for.
Okay, I think if we could somehow maybe do some reform that brokers would be have access to give out to clients would be helpful. So maybe that's something we can talk about it at a later time.
Absolutely. And Brad mentioned the software products that home inspectors use. Many of them have a repair list, I think CRL list function. That's also very helpful for realtors to come in, and if there's 15 items that the inspector has reported, and you have the discussion with the client and they decide we want these 3 items repaired, then they can come through and select those particular items, and that makes it into a nice one-page summary that's easily attached to the repair request form.
That's a good idea. Well, I want to thank both of you for being with us today and sharing this information. And we are planning on doing a really big webinar, hopefully in August, between home inspectors and realtors from across the state. And we're working on that now. And I think the biggest thing that we all need to remember is communication with our clients for expectations. So we'll work on some of these things we've talked about today. And again, I want to thank both of you for your time and your knowledge and your expertise. And I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thanks.
Oh, it's only.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.